brain works with electrical signals, and that it is these electrical signals that allow us to perform everyday tasks, from smiling and waving to talking. Your brain passes signals through neurons, little tiny cells that create electrical pathways in the brain. Have you ever wondered how these electrical signals are created? Turns out it's not actually that complicated. It's a combination of two processes: diffusion and active transport. Diffusion is when molecules move from a high concentration to a low concentration. Molecules want to do this, and it doesn't require a lot of energy because it usually happens on its own. However, active transport helps molecules move from a low concentration to a high concentration. Now this does require energy because it doesn't occur on its own. Now let's see how this applies to the brain. Let's take a look at the nerve cell membrane. Now in the middle we see the phospholipid bilayer, made up of tiny phospholipids which give the cell protection. On the bottom we see the cytoplasm, or the inside of the cell. And on the outside we see the extracellular matrix. Now this is a transmembrane protein. A transmembrane protein is a protein that spans the membrane of the cell and helps the cell with various jobs. This particular transmembrane protein is called a sodium-potassium pump. Its job is to attract little sodium ions from the inside of the cell and bind them to the inside of the protein. Once exactly 3 sodium ions are bound to the inside of the protein, our little friend ATP will come and leave a little phosphate group on the protein. This phosphate group has so much energy that it causes the protein to flip, change shape, and eject the sodium ions into the outside of the cell. Now this new shape attracts potassium ions, which bind to the protein. Once 2 potassium ions are bound to the protein, the little phosphate group leaves and causes the protein to go back to its original shape, ejecting potassium ions to the inside of the cell. Now this does a couple of things. First, it raises the sodium ion concentration under the outside of the cell and raises the potassium ion concentration to the inside of the cell. Also, it makes the inside of the cell slightly more negative because we're taking 3 positive ions and putting them outside of the cell, but only replacing it with 2 positive ions. So next comes the simple diffusion part. Remember how I said molecules naturally want to diffuse simply, go to a higher concentration to a lower concentration? Well, sodium ions are no different. Once they realize that there's a higher concentration of sodium outside the cell, they naturally want to get back into the cell and make the concentrations equal. And they do this by going through ion channels. Now every time a sodium ion goes through an ion channel, it creates a tiny bit of voltage. And this voltage, although it may not seem like a lot, when created over and over again through many different cells, is enough for your neurons to feel and understand. Next time you want to say a sentence or shake someone's hand, thank your sodium-potassium pumps, because without them, you wouldn't be doing a whole lot.